Please subscribe my channel and enjoy the stories.
It started with a disappearance. Not the kind you read about in tabloids or see in local newspapers. This one was quieter, stranger, and far more unsettling. On October 14, 2017, 3 experienced hikers, Ethan Cole, Laura Myers, and Ryan Park, began their weekend expedition into the Black Ridge Mountains of northern Colorado. They were all in their late 20s, adventurous and well-equipped. Their plan was simple: hike through the Ridge Trail, camp for 2 nights, and record a short travel vlog for their growing YouTube channel, Trail Seekers. But none of them ever uploaded another video again. When they failed to return home after 4 days, local authorities launched a standard search and rescue operation. It wasn't unusual for hikers to go missing, but what search teams found deep inside the Black Ridge Range was unlike anything they had ever seen. Their campsite was discovered near the tree line, tents ripped open from the inside, sleeping bags shredded, and their belongings scattered as if they had fled in panic. Ethan's camera tripod stood upright, pointing toward the forest. The camera itself, however, was missing. But the strangest thing was the sound. Searchers reported hearing low, distant humming, like a human voice vibrating deep within the valley. Some described it as chanting, others said it sounded mechanical, but all agreed it came from somewhere beneath the ground. By day 3 of the search, 2 rescuers quit. They claimed the forest didn't feel right. One of them, a veteran with 10 years of mountain rescue experience, later told a local journalist, "It wasn't the silence that scared me. It was the feeling that the mountain was breathing. The footage that shouldn't exist." A week later, Ethan's camera was found wedged between rocks near a stream, half buried under leaves. The SD card was damaged, but data recovery specialists from Denver managed to retrieve fragments of video. The footage began normally, the group laughing, setting up their tents, and joking about bears. As night fell, the tone shifted. There were strange metallic noises echoing from the valley. Ryan joked that it was the ghost of a miner. But later footage, time-stamped around 2:47 a.m., showed something terrifying. The camera was lying sideways, capturing only partial frames. You could hear Laura whispering, "It's outside. I can hear it moving." Then a shape. A dark, human-like silhouette crossed the frame in the distance, moving awkwardly, almost bent backward. It paused, and you could hear what sounded like bones creaking, like wood bending under pressure. Ethan's voice came next. "Don't look at it. Just stay quiet." The footage ended abruptly with a shrill, distorted noise. When experts analyzed the audio, they found subsonic frequencies, sounds below the range of human hearing. Some believed it was environmental interference. Others thought the mountains themselves were emitting a kind of resonance, a low-frequency vibration capable of inducing panic and hallucinations. But one thing was certain: something or someone was there that night. Local legends resurface. After the video surfaced, old legends about the Black Ridge Mountains began to re-emerge. Local indigenous tribes had long warned against entering the upper ridge after sunset. They called it the place of the Hollow Ones. According to tribal stories, ancient miners once unearthed something buried deep within the mountain, something alive. They sealed the tunnels and abandoned the area, claiming that voices from below would mimic human cries to lure people inside. In the early 1900s, several miners disappeared while exploring uncharted tunnels near Ridge Point. Their tools were later found, perfectly arranged in a circle deep underground. No bodies were ever recovered.
Locals still avoid that region. Campers report hearing tapping sounds beneath their tents at night, like knuckles drumming softly on rock. Sheriff Alan Rogers, who led the search, later admitted that the official report was heavily edited. In an off-the-record interview, he said, "We were told not to mention certain details, like the symbols we found carved on the trees near their camp, or the footprints. The footprints weren't human, too large, too wide, and arranged in patterns that made no sense. When plaster casts were taken, they revealed an odd, elongated structure, like a mixture of animal and human anatomy." The FBI briefly took over the case, labeling it a possible wildlife incident. But no mountain creature matched the prints found there. Locals whispered that the government wasn't hiding a wild animal, they were hiding the mountain itself. In early November 2017, 3 weeks after the disappearance of Ethan, Laura, and Ryan, a second expedition was organized, this time not by authorities, but by a private group of hikers and amateur investigators who had been following the story online. They called themselves the Ridge Explorers. The group consisted of 5 members: Mark Holloway, a former ranger position; Sophie Lang, a journalist for an online paranormal magazine; David Ortiz, a sound technician; Leah Kim, a geologist; and Ben Carter, an experienced drone operator. Their goal was simple: to retrace the missing hiker's path, locate the original campsite, and find any physical evidence that might explain what really happened. At first, the journey went smoothly. The weather was cold but clear, and the air in the Black Ridge Mountains carried that distinct scent of pine and wet soil. They documented every step of their journey, filming for what they hoped would become a small investigative documentary. Mark led the group confidently. He knew the trails well, having patrolled them for years before he left his ranger position. But even he admitted something about this area made him uneasy. "There's a pressure here," he said in one of his recorded logs. "It's like the air is heavier than it should be. You breathe it in and it feels like it's watching you." On the second night, they reached the same clearing where the first group's torn tents had been found. Time had erased much of the scene, but traces remained. The burned circle of an old campfire, scraps of fabric half buried under leaves, and faint markings on the trees. Ben launched his drone to capture an aerial view of the area. The feed showed the vast mountain ridges stretching endlessly, mist swirling between peaks like slow-moving rivers. Then, as the drone rose higher, the signal began to distort. The video feed cut into static for a moment, then returned with something strange in view. A wide circular clearing deep within the forest, perfectly symmetrical, as though the trees had been cleared intentionally. At the center of the circle was a dark pit. They hadn't noticed it on any maps. Mark insisted they check it out in the morning, but that night none of them could sleep. Around 3:15 a.m., David, who had left an audio recorder running near the edge of camp, captured a series of low-frequency sounds, rhythmic, almost patterned, like breathing mixed with metallic clanging. It lasted for 7 minutes before fading away. When they analyzed the file later, Sophie noticed something disturbing. Between the deep sounds, a faint human voice could be heard whispering. It repeated one word over and over: "below." The next morning, they headed towards the circular clearing spotted by the drone. The hike took them nearly 4 hours through dense terrain and rocky slopes. When they arrived, the air around the pit was unnaturally still. No birds, no insects, just silence. The hole itself was about 8 feet wide, descending into total darkness. Leah, being a geologist, examined the edges and noted something unusual. The rock was smooth, as though cut or melted. "This isn't natural," she said quietly. "Something shaped this." They decided to lower a light and camera into the pit using a rope. The first 50 feet revealed nothing but damp rock. Then the light flickered, and the feed showed something that made everyone freeze. On the screen, several objects lay half buried in the dirt: a torn backpack, a rusted camping stove, and a broken tripod. But then the camera panned slightly, and they saw what looked like human handprints pressed into the stone, deep, elongated, and facing upward, as if someone had tried to climb out. David muttered, "Jesus Christ!" as the camera trembled. The light flickered again, and for a brief second, a shadow moved across the lower part of the tunnel, thin, almost spider-like. The rope jerked violently. Ben shouted for everyone to pull it up, but when the camera emerged, the lens was cracked and the light was gone. They didn't speak for nearly a minute. The silence between them was louder than any scream. That night, Sophie recorded her thoughts in her journal. "It's not a cave. It's not a tunnel. It feels like an entrance. And I don't think it's meant for us." Later that evening, David began hearing something outside the tent. Soft knocks, 3 at a time, like someone tapping on wood. Mark checked the area with his flashlight but found nothing. The sound stopped the moment he stepped outside and returned the second he went back in. Ben's drone footage showed faint lights moving in the distance between trees, pulsing like lanterns. But when they zoomed in, the lights scattered, as if they'd been watching and didn't want to be seen. By dawn, the group decided to leave. They packed quickly, too shaken to continue deeper. But when they reached the trail leading out of the ridge, the GPS devices malfunctioned. Compass needles spun endlessly. The path they had come from was gone, replaced by a line of trees they swore hadn't been there before. Leah started crying softly. "The mountain's changing. It's not supposed to move like that." Mark tried to calm everyone, guiding them west using the sun as a reference. But as they moved downhill, they realized the forest wasn't leading them out, it was pulling them inward. By noon, the temperature dropped sharply, and fog began to roll in. Visibility fell to almost nothing. David stayed close behind Sophie, holding the audio recorder like a lifeline. Through the mist, a shape appeared, tall, motionless, standing between 2 trees. It looked like a person at first, but when Mark shouted a greeting, the figure didn't respond. Instead, it tilted its head slowly, the way an animal does when it's curious. The group ran until their legs ached, following the faint sound of running water, hoping it would lead them to the stream near the base. But the deeper they went, the louder the humming became, that same metallic resonance the search team had mentioned weeks ago. When they finally reached the stream, the current was red with mineral runoff, or at least that's what Leah told herself it was. Floating in the water was a torn piece of yellow fabric, the same color as the jacket Laura had been wearing in Ethan's last footage. Sophie stopped recording at that moment. Her voice shook as she whispered, "We shouldn't have come here." The last footage recovered from their trip ends with Mark turning to the camera and saying, "If anyone finds this, don't follow the sound. It's not calling you, it's leading you." That was the last time any of them were seen alive. 3 months later, park rangers discovered their camp abandoned, the same way the first one had been. Tents ripped from the inside, gear scattered, and one peculiar detail that matched the previous case. All 5 sleeping bags were empty, but warm, as if whoever had been inside had just gotten up moments before the rescuers arrived. Winter came early that year. Snow blanketed the upper ridges of the Black Ridge Mountains, sealing off most of the trails that search teams had once used. By the time rescue units returned in January 2018, the area where both groups had vanished was buried under nearly 4 feet of snow. Officially, both disappearances were attributed to environmental exposure. The case files were quietly closed, but that didn't stop others from asking questions.
Among them was Dr. Evelyn Hart, a university researcher in Denver specializing in acoustic psychology, the study of how sound affects human behavior. She had read the reports about low-frequency vibrations captured in the footage and wanted to investigate the mountains herself. Her research had revealed something peculiar. There were several regions across the world known to produce unexplained infrasound, deep subsonic frequencies that can cause unease, anxiety, even hallucinations. Many UFO sightings, ghost reports, and haunted places shared the same pattern. But the Black Ridge frequencies were different. They weren't random, they carried a rhythm, almost like a pulse. When Evelyn contacted the sheriff's office for access, she was told the area was restricted due to unstable ground. But through a local contact, a retired ranger named Tom Beckett, she managed to obtain the original recovered audio files. She spent weeks analyzing them, and what she found made her question everything she knew about sound. Hidden beneath the low-frequency hum was a faint pattern of human-like tones. Not words, but syllables, structured in a way that mimicked language. It was as if the mountain itself was trying to speak. Evelyn described it later in her notes. It's communicating through resonance, not speech. The frequencies rise and fall like breath. It's not random. It's responding to something. In February 2018, she and Tom decided to enter the restricted zone with lightweight recording gear and vibration sensors. They left their truck near the base and hiked in on foot. Tom had been on dozens of search missions in those mountains, but he'd never gone this far without backup. The trees were bare, their branches sharp against the sky. The snow crunched underfoot with a sound that echoed far longer than it should have. After nearly 3 hours, they reached what remained of the second group's camp. Most of the gear was gone, taken for evidence, but the marks on the trees were still visible, strange spirals carved into the bark, each surrounded by 3 shallow cuts. Evelyn placed one of her recording devices near the carvings and activated it. Within minutes, the sensors began to pick up vibrations, faint but rhythmic. Tom frowned. That's not wind. The readings pulsed steadily, like a heartbeat. The pitch rose slightly, then fell, and Evelyn noticed something even more unsettling. Each time the frequency shifted, the snow around them trembled, not violently, but enough to make small flakes slide off branches. They were standing on something that was alive. The deeper they went, the stronger the vibrations became. Around dusk, they found the circular clearing the second group had recorded, now partially filled with snow. The pit in the center was still there, its edges frozen in a perfect circle. They set up a light to examine it, and that's when Evelyn saw movement below. Something pale, half buried under ice, shifting slightly as if reacting to the light. Tom leaned over to look closer. "It's a body," he whispered. They both knelt beside the edge. Beneath the thin layer of frost was a human form, a man's face, eyes closed, skin gray. Evelyn gasped. It was Mark Holloway, the leader of the second expedition. His body was perfectly preserved, like he had been frozen in time. No decay, no signs of struggle, just peace. His expression almost looked calm. They recorded everything and prepared to contact authorities the next morning. But as they began packing, the ground beneath the pit emitted a sound, low, guttural, almost organic. The ice cracked slightly, releasing a wave of air so cold it burned their throats.
Evelyn dropped her recorder. The vibration meter went wild, its readings spiking uncontrollably. Then the sound changed, from a hum to something resembling breathing. The snow shifted again, but this time it wasn't from the wind. Something below was moving. Tom grabbed her arm. "We're leaving. Now." They ran. Through the trees, through the snow, stumbling and gasping, the sound following them, deeper, louder, like the mountain was inhaling. At one point, Evelyn turned back and saw the trees behind them bending slightly inward, as if pulled toward the clearing.
When they finally reached their truck, the windows were fogged from the inside. On the windshield, drawn with a finger, were the same 3 spiral symbols they had seen on the trees. Neither of them spoke on the drive back. That night, Evelyn listened to the last recording. At the moment the ground began to move, a new layer of sound appeared. Soft whispers, overlapping. She slowed the audio by 200%. It wasn't English, but she recognized one word, repeated in rhythm with the vibration. Awaken. She didn't sleep that night. The next day, she contacted the university to submit her findings. They never replied. When she followed up a week later, her research account had been deleted, and her access to university servers was revoked. Tom tried to reach her several times after that, but she stopped answering his calls. 2 weeks later, her car was found abandoned near the same trailhead. Doors open, engine off, radio still playing white noise. The last entry in her notebook read, "It doesn't want to be studied. It wants to be heard." Spring arrived late that year. By the time the snow melted, the Black Ridge Mountains were officially declared off-limits. The Forestry Department cited land instability and environmental risk, but locals knew better. They called it the lockdown. Rumors spread online. People claimed the government had sealed off tunnels. Helicopters were seen hovering over the ridge at night. Some hikers said they heard drilling. Others said they heard screams. Then, in May 2018, a video appeared anonymously on a small paranormal forum. It showed shaky footage of a man walking through the forest, panting, whispering to himself. The timestamp read April 28, 2018. The man in the video was Tom Beckett. In the first few seconds, he says, "They're covering it up. They found more than anyone should." He looked terrified, disoriented. The camera swung wildly as he stumbled through the trees. Behind him, faint rhythmic sounds echoed, low and distant, like a heaviness buried under stone. He stopped near a ridge and turned the camera on himself. His eyes were hollow, his face pale. They built over it. They didn't close it. They built something on top. Before he could explain, a sound like deep metallic grinding filled the audio. The camera shook violently, the image blurred, and Tom screamed. The last thing visible was a flash of light behind him, followed by static. The clip ended there. Authorities dismissed it as fake, but sound analysts later confirmed the background noise matched the same subsonic frequencies from the previous recordings. 2 weeks later, Tom's body was found near the mountain's base, lying face up in a shallow creek. His expression was calm, the same as Mark Holloway's. By now, the Black Ridge case had turned into a modern legend. Podcasts, documentaries, and online forums debated every theory: government experiments, ancient cults, subterranean creatures, even geological anomalies. But one voice stood out among the chaos. A man named Dr. Howard Fisk, a retired seismologist who had worked in the region during the 1970s. In an interview, he said something chilling. "There's an entire cavern network under those mountains. We used to monitor vibrations from there. Deep, rhythmic pulses. They weren't seismic. They were timed, like a signal." When asked what kind of signal, he replied, "It's not from above, it's from below." In late 2019, satellite imagery showed new construction near the Black Ridge Restricted Zone, a facility labeled Black Ridge Geological Research Center. The official purpose was mineral stability monitoring. But those who lived nearby noticed strange things: heavy trucks arriving at night, constant low humming, and occasional power blackouts. A local hunter named Daniel Cross managed to get close enough to record audio from the perimeter. What he captured sounded mechanical at first, like machinery, but as the noise deepened, it began to resemble chanting. The pattern matched the old recordings almost perfectly. Daniel uploaded the clip online. Within 24 hours, his account was deleted and every reposted version of the file disappeared. He went missing 3 days later. His rifle was found near a frozen stream, alongside a single footprint, larger than human, pressed deep into the mud. The story should have ended there, but in 2021, a small earthquake hit the Black Ridge region. Magnitude 3.7, minor but unusual for that area. Seismic sensors across the state recorded a strange pattern before and after the quake. 3 pulses, then silence, then 3 more. Some called it coincidence, others didn't. Shortly after, the restricted zone expanded by another 10 miles, and military presence increased. Locals were told to relocate due to land rehabilitation. Yet at night, residents from nearby towns still reported hearing the low hum, faint but distinct, traveling through the ground like a living heartbeat. A journalist named Rachel Devereaux, who had followed the Black Ridge case for years, managed to contact a former contractor from the supposed research center. He agreed to speak anonymously. He told her they weren't studying the mountain, they were containing it. "There's something under there," he said, voice trembling. "It's old, older than the rock itself. It's not dead, it's waiting." He described enormous hollow chambers beneath the ridge, perfectly smooth walls covered in markings no one could decipher. And at the center of it all, a mass that seemed to breathe. Rachel asked what it was. He hesitated before replying. "Whatever it isn't meant to be found by humans. Every time we drill, the readings spike, like it's aware of us, like it's listening." The call ended abruptly after that. Rachel never heard from him again. The final known incident occurred on October 14, 2022, exactly 5 years after the first disappearance. Residents of the nearby town of Ridgeview reported a deep rumbling beneath their homes around midnight. The sound lasted 7 minutes. When morning came, several residents found spiral patterns in the dirt of their backyards, perfect circles pressed into the soil. Cell towers in the region went offline for 24 hours. Seismic data during that time vanished from official logs. And in the middle of that blackout, a faint signal was transmitted across multiple radio frequencies. A deep, slow tone repeating at equal intervals. When the waveform was analyzed later, it matched the pattern of a human breath. The sound was coming from 12 miles beneath the Black Ridge Mountains. The mountains remain closed to this day. The official statement claims geological risk and unstable terrain. But for those who've heard the recordings, who've seen the footage, the truth is different. There is something in the mountains, something vast, something ancient. It doesn't move like a creature, and it doesn't think like one either. It waits. It listens. It calls to those who hear its voice. And when you stand on the ridge at night, you can feel it, a faint vibration beneath your feet, a pulse rising through the earth, like the mountain itself is alive.